Right, this is the Cornell IDA Governance Committee meeting. I'm going to call that to order. Ready for this? Do you want to just take over?
Yeah, let's go. Yep, that's all right with you. Then I'll go over quickly. So as you know, the Governance Committee did meet last week. We discussed several changes to policies. We just have a few revisions to those changes that I walk through quickly with governance. So that way, when we get to the formal board meeting, we can explain it very efficiently to the entire board for adoption. And then at the end of this meeting and my little speech, we will vote to recommend these policies for adoption to the board. All right, so we're going to start with the procurement policy, which everyone should have. The main change from what we talked about last week being that we did change those thresholds in accordance with the upward shift in the requirements for bids. So that would be on the first policy. It's on the second to third page of your packet here. These were the amounts that we had discussed last week, basically the different thresholds for discretion versus verbal quotations versus requests for proposals. So if you want to just take a quick look at those, these are the amounts we discussed last week. Everything else is largely the same. Modified the insurance provision a little bit. That insurance is going to be procured as professional services and exempted therefore from the.
Real quick. Just go over how we have to advertise jobs. Now it's just on our website.
You mean advertise requests for proposals?
Yeah.
It should be on your website, and then I'll check to see if there's any other specific requirements regarding any local newspaper circulation is a typical one we see.
Okay.
But when you get into the circumstance, when you are in the stages of putting out an RFP for something, we will certainly assist with the whole process of that and including some requirements just to make sure, including certificates of non-collusion are included in the bid, which are required by the state law, and other things of that nature.
I've got one to go out right now. Do you want to? And I've had the
Let's talk.
written by our consultant. Do you want to read it?
I will. Let's talk about that after the meeting now. All right. So
there is a certain time frame we have to give when we're putting out an RFP for the potential.
yeah, correct.
Reasonable.
It's got to be reasonable. It's kind of dependent situationally. So I don't want to speak
On the scope of the
indefinite.
job.
Yeah, I don't want to speak in definite terms right now. But if we could talk certainly after this about the specific RFP in question here. So that's all for the procurement policy. That's largely changed. Everyone just wants to flip through it on the governance committee, make sure they're okay with it. Again, we did discuss it in depth last week, so we should be good there. I'm going to just do something a little out of order. This second packet you have is the IDC. This is a new procurement policy for the IDC. We've discussed that LDCs and IDCs are subject to different requirements. This policy meets the requirements for a local development corporation to procure policies, which is going to be different from that of an industrial development agency. So you can see much shorter, and it also a lot of discretion awarded to the board in determining whether or not an RFP would be in the best interest of the corporation. So that's the major change from the policies we saw last week, all in consultation with council. All right, so then now we're going to switch back to our big packet. This is going to be the code of ethics. This is largely the same as you saw last week. The exception is instead of citing the entire law, we just reference the statute in case it changes. That avoids the need for us to amend this policy. And of course, we'll keep you informed of any changes. This code of ethics is going to be the same for the IDA and the IDC, just obviously with differing terms. Sexual harassment, airborne infectious disease policy. These are two new policies that we're going to be adopting. They are only required for the IDA because they're required for employers. So the IDA is the employer here. So these are the model New York State policies that they recommend, and we suggest that the board adopts them to ensure they are in compliance with the labor and executive law. Real property acquisition policy. Again, this is a new policy, just a policy you're required to have. Provides the circumstances under which the IDA is going to acquire property. Again, affording deference to the board and their discretion, whatever for due diligence required, things appraisals, things title surveys and searches in that nature, citing to the eminent domain law, and then also, of course, accepting out any type of projects in the sense that would typically become the agency from this policy. If you look again, we'll actually go through. We'll go through. Okay, so now we're going to go into the internal controls and financial accountability. We had discussed the threshold for transfers and disbursements that is going to require two signatures versus just discretion of one. I think we agreed last week on raising this to $2,500, which was okay. I also spoke with Sean. He mentioned to me that this applies for extraordinary expenditures. So when something's a line item in the budget that's already approved by the board, that wouldn't fall in here. So like your example of when you entered into a lease agreement, that lease agreement that was already approved by the board.
We don't need the two
Yes,
signatures for that.
but when this is things that are extraordinary expenditures that are not accounted for already in the budget and not already approved by the board. So think if a tree falls
Gotcha.
on the back of the property and that is in excess of $2,500, that would then require the two signatures. So those are examples. And again, of course, if you have questions when we get into weird situations, we are happy to advise and help. Turning over to our FOIL policy, the only change here is I inserted Erin's information as she is the record access officer, and the policy does require that to be stated. So anyone who wants to submit a FOIL request is easily able to do that and find the appropriate person responsible for responding to the request. Next up, we have the investment and deposit policy and the real property disposition policy. There are absolutely zero changes to these policies. These policies, along with the procurement policy, are required to be reviewed every year by the board and readopted regardless of changes. As you know, we are doing some changes to procurement, so that doesn't fall into this category, but we are going to just review and approve these two policies to comply with state law, which requires you to do that annually. Moving on to our IDC, we have our procurement policy here, which we went through very quickly. We have our FOIL policy, have a record retention policy. That might be missing from your packet, but it's the same for the IDA and the IDC. Again, just standard policy required by law, saying you'll adhere to the guidelines for what New York State requires you to keep records for. And then the disposition of property guidelines. And our investment policy for the IDC, which again, as a public authority, just need to be adopted every year. So those are all for policies, minimal changes. You'll note that we have, last week we had discussed the defense and indemnification policy being amended. We've decided against doing that just for simplicity's sake. And if we want to do that in the future, but there's no requirement to do that. Good morning. Other than that, I just would like to walk through the appointments that we discussed last week. So I told Erin this, and I'm going to tell you guys this. Everything we discussed right now is obviously in draft form. If there's changes that we feel need to be made, that is okay. That's what we're here today to do, to talk collaboratively and decide who's what. I'm going to hand out now to the governance committee and the executive director copies of our proposed appointments for the 2026 year. If there's any changes that you feel are necessary, this is now the time to raise them, and we will raise them in front of the entire board as well. So if you just wanted to take a look and a minute to review these and make sure everyone is in agreement with it. The only changes that you're going to see from last year is you're going to see at the bottom these designation of officers. So we had agreed on last week, the record access officer, the record management officer is going to be Erin. She's hands-on with the files. She's a good point person for people to get in contact with when they need to access records, and also a good person to organize and maintain the records. The ethics officer, which is the individual that will be consulted in the event a board member feels that they have a conflict of interest, and of course with reference to counsel, is going to be the executive director. The contracting officer, who is going to be the individual responsible for the disposition of real property, deciding things of that nature, and procurement guidelines and policies is going to be Mr. Nesbitt, the executive director, and then the FOIL appeals officer is going to be Mr. Nesbitt. That means if a FOIL comes through and it's denied in part or in whole, everyone has the right to appeal that to a different individual, and that individual has to be separate from the record access officer. So that will be Mr. Nesbitt, who then will decide the appeal, and then from there. Other than that, everything else remains the same. If there's any proposed changes at this juncture that we want to talk about today, we did update our firm name too, because I think, as I mentioned, we did merge with another firm at the beginning of last year. So our name just got updated as well. But does everyone at the governance committee level feel okay with these appointments? All right, perfect. Are there any, let me go through these are the board evaluations. just a tally. I'm gonna hand them out now. I'm gonna hand them out again for the full board to review. Well, I'll hand them out for one members who are not here. There's nothing wrong with these that require further discussion or input, but if the board would like to discuss them, of course, we are here too. What's gonna happen after today is the board's going to, full board will vote to approve this, and it will be submitted with your annual report to the Authority Budgets Office. The back is just blank because it's the same thing, double-sided, so just ignore that, please. You can keep that, because we're gonna go through it with the full board. I just gave you guys a preview. Okay, everyone has no questions. I think at this point, we're going to need a vote for the governance committee to recommend the policies for adoption to the full board
Okay.
and the appointments. So
Make that motion.
I don't think we need a motion, right?
you could just motion, you could
Yes.
just, yeah,
A second.
perfect. So that's the policies and the appointments as presented are recommended by the governance committee for approval to the full board. And then while we're here, we're just going to review our minutes from the governance committee's last meeting last week. So if the governance committee just wants to take a look at them, they're on the second page. Make sure that they look like a fair and accurate description of, second page after the agenda.
Oh, gotcha.
And make sure they're a fair and accurate description of the meeting last week. Any modifications? All right, then we could vote to accept them as a governance committee, so
So moved. Second.
perfect.
All in favor, aye.
Does the governance committee have any other matters that they wish to discuss at this point? It is 7:52, so we have about 8 minutes to discuss prior to the full board meeting starting.
We'll need executive session with those.
The letter, yeah, we'll do that. We're gonna do that in the full board meeting, I believe. This is the best time to do it so that way. Yep,
Just so,
yeah,
the governance committee is aware anyway.
yeah,
Yep. So the one recommendation that I'm going to bring forward, and I shared the rolling action item list
Yes.
with all of you.
review it.
I would like us to bring up at the board meeting the possibility of maintaining a rolling action item list and moving forward with a strategic planning process, possibly hiring a consultant to do so.
Yeah.
And lead us through that process. So that's all I wanted to add. Morning.
That sounds good, and I think that we're more than happy to consult on that as well. That sounds like a great action plan for the agency moving forward.
So we're gonna have a executive session for the governance.
No, I think we're just gonna go into it we're gonna do the board meeting. So if
Can we
there's
look at
no
the
other
full board?
business that the governance committee wishes to discuss, we can have a motion to adjourn this meeting and take a break before the full
Motion
board
to
meeting.
adjourn.
I make that motion.
Great, so
All in favor? Aye.
adjourned. The meeting of the governance committee is now over and we can
No. Yep.
Ready? I'll call the meeting to order. This is a regular meeting of the City of Horn Island Industrial Development Agency. The time is 8:08. First, we'll have the secretary's report. John?
I'll accept the motion for the secretary's report in your packet.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Next, the treasurer's report. Ed?
I'll accept the motion for the packets on February financials.
John?
Second.
Any questions, comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Committee reports, audit committee. John?
Yes, in February, out of the operating account, we paid out $35,173.16. Accept the motion for that.
I'll make a motion.
Second. Any comments? Not all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Carried. Personnel committee, there's nothing to report. Governance committee,
Yep, the governance committee met prior to this meeting. At 7:30 this morning, we reviewed with our legal counsel the revisions to our policies that we are to approve today. They were discussed at the previous board meeting. The committee will recommend full approval. And Lizzie, if you want to review.
Yeah, so if I could just take this time to review some policies. I know we went through them in depth last week. As I said, Sean and I have met to review them even further. So we'll walk through these very quickly, and then I'm just going to give a quick overview for the minutes purposes of what exactly we'll be approving to at the end of my speech, and then we could vote on full approval of them if we're all in agreement. So first up is in your packet, which Aaron prepared, is going to be the procurement policy. This looks incredibly similar to the one we reviewed and discussed last week. You'll just notice on page 2 and page 3, we increase these threshold amounts for when we require discretion versus verbal quotations versus written quotations. We reviewed these further with council, found them to be sufficient. So we are recommending these for approval, and the governance committee is as well. The only other change too, if you move into exceptions to bidding, we modified the insurance provision a little bit, providing that it is a professional service and actual insurance to the agency are not subject to procurements, which makes sense, is in line with best practices. Other than that, there are no other changes from last week to our procurement policy. Is there any questions at this point on the procurement policy? All right, great. So moving on, now we're going to move into the code of ethics. This is similar to last week. Again, the only difference is you'll notice under standards established by the general municipal law, instead of writing the entire text of the statute there, we just cite to it in the event that it changes. It doesn't require amendment of the policy. And of course, we will keep you informed as your counsel if there are any changes to this policy or the laws surrounding it. Further, next, we have our sexual harassment and our airborne disease policy. These are two policies that are statutorily required for employers of New York State. So that's why you'll notice the IBA has them and the IDC does not. These are the model policies that the Department of Labor recommends adopting. We recommend as your counsel you adopt them to comply with executive and labor laws. The real property acquisition policy, again, exactly as you saw last week, this is a new policy that the agency is required to have, setting forth the circumstances under which the agency will acquire real property. The internal controls and financial accountability policy, this is where we discuss the discretion of the amount of signatories needed to approve certain expenditures. So we discussed moving that amount from 1,000 to 2,500. We felt that was suitable as council, as the board did as well. I spoke further with Sean about this and just wanted to note expenditures in the budget that are already approved as line items aren't subject to this. This is for extraordinary expenses that are not already approved by the board. Next, we have our FOIL policy, again, just a required policy New York State requires you to have. We'll have Aaron as our record access officer, Mr. Nisbet as our FOIL appeals officer. Record retention disposition policy, again, a new policy required to have by state law, agreeing that you'll abide by New York State schedules for retaining records of the agency. And then your investment and deposit policy and your property disposition guidelines, there's 0 changes to these, but state law requires them to be reviewed for accuracy and updated annually. We are recommending no changes due to no sufficient changes in the law within the past year. The board is just going to readopt them today and restate them as of the date hereof. For policies, that's all I have. So I'm going to just go through quickly for the minutes of which policies we have. That way we know exactly what we did today. So we're going to ask the board shortly to approve revised procurement code of ethics, sexual harassment policies, and we're going to ask them to adopt new airborne disease policies, real property acquisition policies, record retention policies, and a record access policy, aka FOIL. The board has any comments to these policies? We're happy to take them at this time. Governance had previously recommended them for adoption. If not, then I will turn the floor over to the board to vote on this matter.
They're all pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I think that had a good talk last week through them, and I'm glad we all met. Like I said, I had Sean look at them too, and he's in agreement with no
Do I have
changes.
a motion to accept the,
I'll make that motion.
as a second?
I'll second it.
Any questions? If not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Yes.
All right, so in line with that, I know this is not exactly on the agenda, but I handed out as people walked in draft appointments and the summary of confidential board evaluations. I just want to get these out of the way as they are related to governance and compliance. Does anyone not have a copy of either of these documents in front of them on the board? Sean, I can do a copy too. So what you have first is a summary of the appointments that we discussed for the 2026 year of the board. The difference from last year is just the designation of officers at the bottom. Again, we have Erin as our record access officer, record management officer, and then Mr. Nisbet as our ethics officer, contracting officer, and FOIL appeals officer. Other than that, these appointments remain unchanged year to year. So if there's any comments, questions on any specific capacity, or anyone would like to modify any of these appointments or discuss it, now is the time. If not, then I'll turn the floor over to the board to vote to approve these appointments for 2026.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second. Any questions, comments, concerns? If not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Appointments.
Great, thank you. All right, last but not least, well, we're actually going to from you again in a few minutes, but we have our confidential evaluation of board performance. So I had everyone complete a confidential survey for the performance of the Industrial Development Agency's board. This is a summary tally sheet that we are going to be submitting to the state with the annual report. If there's any questions, any concerns, anything the board wishes to discuss regarding this evaluation.
Is this just a sample?
This is just a summary. So yeah, this is, yeah.
One side is just the other,
Yeah.
this is the empty one. right?
Yep. So this is just a sample. So you guys had, the board members had filled this out last week. Yes, there is an empty one on the back. This is what matters. So obviously they're confidential. I tallied them. There were no names on any of them. What is required now is that the board review it and then vote to submit it with their annual report, which means basically I will just email it into the state after this meeting. So if there are any concerns, any questions, we can always discuss this too at a later date if anyone wants to come back to it. But this time I'll turn again the floor over to the board to maintain a vote or any discussion regarding this survey.
Any problems you see with the report sending it up there, any issues?
I don't see any for sure. Obviously, we have one somewhat disagree. For relating to our measured performance goals that are contributing to accomplishing its mission. We could certainly discuss that. And I know we've already discussed through governance some differing procedures that we're looking to implement within the next year, which we could talk further as a board about regarding a kind of rolling project list and a rolling action item list. So the board's fully informed and we have a more maintained and organized way. So I do think that we've already discussed as a board the way to remedy that. And then otherwise, I think everything looks pretty much in line. There's nothing that stands out to me, but thank you for asking. So are there any other comments at this time? All right, well, I'll turn it over to the board for a motion to approve of this.
Make a motion.
Second.
Any comments? If not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Passed.
All right, great. That's it for policies. The IDC meeting is directly after this, so we'll just quickly go over those at that point. But at this time, I'll turn it over to Mr. Nisbet for the executive director's. Oh, sorry. Do you have anything else to add?
I was just going to add
Governance,
what you already
yeah.
touched on, that we quickly discussed moving forward with a strategic planning process and possibly utilizing a professional consultant to mediate the process. Go into that in the future. That's it.
What I'd like to do is, so it doesn't get lost, that we have like a lunch meeting for us.
Set up a day.
Yeah, offsite, probably your place, and then we'll go over these things and how we want to move forward with. The list is great. I've read it. It's good because it gives me something in my hand, see what I've got.
Have you guys seen the rail list or no? That we talked about.
Yeah, I think it was really great too. It's a great way to, it keeps track of everything so that way nothing is able to fall through the cracks. And keeping it, I think also too for staff will be great to keep them working on
It's
as
just
well. That way.
inclusive, just kind of an example structure. So we can update monthly and keep us all informed and move forward.
But I think if we do something, if we just get a couple hours, then we'll try to do it sometime in April. And then we won't forget about it. Just check everybody's schedule.
Yeah, I think that's a great governance.
From a legal standpoint, does your organization have a consultant, or is that something we actually have to get an RFP for?
We have a compliance manager. So her name's Julie Marshall. She's worked very closely, I know, with staff preparing the parish reports. I'll certainly be happy to connect you with her. I work closely with her. She's incredible. She's got a lot of years of experience. So she's not an attorney, but she is our compliance manager. She was an executive director of a nearby county industrial development agency for a long time and worked on the staff side before coming to us. But she handles all of the compliance that we do. So she's a great resource.
This is our third year with Julie.
Yeah.
It's the Paris report.
Yeah, she's great. She knows Paris inside and out. She does it for entities across the state. She also knows compliance inside and out. And like I said, she's got a good perspective because she's been on the agency side prior to coming to the firm. She's not an attorney, as I mentioned. She's compliance manager. So she's a great complement and a great asset to our group. And she's very thorough and very organized.
Okay, the first thing I have is the Paris report. It was all sent to you yesterday. Aaron worked with Julie Marshall to do it. I reviewed it. We made the changes that needed to be made. And basically, all it is a reporting document that has to agree with our audit, so there was a few things in the financials that I thought mischaracterizations in the Paris report. The only thing is the Paris report, the line items for financials is limited, so we have to incorporate some things and others, but it's all balanced. It looks good. We did find a couple issues with properties that we owned and didn't own, which between Aaron and Julie, they fixed it. So I think the Paris report is very well good to go.
Yeah, I will just add to that. I spoke with Julie yesterday, actually, and I know her and Aaron worked very tirelessly on it, and it's very good. It's very accurate, and I think it's a great starting point also for us as an agency going forward to review and use that as a guiding document, given the hours that were put into it. So everyone had the chance to review it. It was provided yesterday via email, to my understanding.
Mhm.
Okay. Any other comments on it, Mr. Nisbet?
I have no other.
Okay.
Like I said, it's been reviewed thoroughly.
Yeah.
I think it's ready to be submitted. And we do need board approval.
Yes, you do need board approval for its submission. So
I'd like to put a motion forward to submit the Paris report as presented.
I'll second it.
Any questions, comments, concerns? If not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passed.
Okay,
Great.
next thing we have is 117 Main. We have a interested party they think is very interested. Michelle is working with them. This is, and I'll go over all. So we should have a commitment that this company wants to take it. There is things and that'll be brought back to the board for approval of it. There is upgrades we have to do. The building heating system has got to be changed. Now we can just put in one, and that's out for quote, or it's going to be. we can probably put in the one the same size as we have now. We don't have to worry about the restaurant going in there. That has to be done. I'm gonna get an overall inspection done of the building. I don't think there's we also have a water pipe coming in the back wall. It's gotta be replaced. So I will have quotes on doing that, the water pipe, replacing the heating system, and then I will work out an arrangement with the prospective company wants to lease it. I'll bring it back to the board, executive committee for the governance committee first. We'll decide if that's something we want to move forward with. I'm looking for a lease. I think, Michelle, what you discussed with them is maybe 3 years. And I don't think they want to go any less, but the term of the lease will depend on what I have to price in to the lease amount, because I got to cover that cost. So if on a 1-year lease, monthly payment would have to be more, because I would have to price in the improvements we have to do. They may want a couple things done, not a lot, but that would have to be priced into to see exactly what they want. It would be a good tenant. I'm confident it would. At the same time, I'll talk about our property on Canasteel Street. The company talked about leasing that. They've got a decision between here and Corning and leasing and buying. The guy that I talked to, he's not the president, but his desire is to lease that. And again, they would need renovations, but they're talking about a 10-year lease. We're very familiar with them. They already leased from us. Great company. It'd be good for us. We've had a lot of other interest in the building down there too, but I should have something by the next meeting to show you guys, a proposed draft lease. The pricing again depends on how long they want to lease it for, but I gotta get into the number. But the way they've talked to me so far, they're looking at 10 years, which is fantastic, to be honest with you. So those two we should have. I believe we'll have, Michelle, I'm sure on 117 Main we'll have something where I have agreed to terms, but then you guys got to agree to. The only other thing I have is and I had a company come to me yesterday. We're looking at a project that could be substantial, $35 million. That'll start in 2027. The company's ready to submit an application. As it goes forward, I will fill you guys in on the details. But I honestly believe it'll happen, but it's off till 27, and it's good for, it's certainly good for the city. You're aware. But, and frankly, they're going to meet with, they've told me they're going to set up an appointment with the mayor and possibly Heather to discuss going forward, but it would be a good project for Warren. Like I said, I think that would go, it is off till 27, but they're looking to submit the application to us right now. So the thing is, we have plenty of time to look at it. There's a couple things to, Lizzie is looking at our application just to make sure it's current.
Yeah.
Everything in it. The other, and the two things, it's in there, but that we have to address, and we can address at the governance get together. We have to address our fee structure, and there's some pilots, and what I've asked Jamie Johnson, for him and I to sit down and just discuss how we determine the assessment of a property, or especially a property that's bare, that's going to be built on. Because really, I don't, and I was on the county for a long time. It kind of jumps around the page, see if we could figure, and talking to somebody else, or talking to somebody that's actually an expert in it, and consulting with Harris Beach to see what is a way to form that, or a true assessment that the initial plan was based on. And if we can have some general rules for that, it's going to make things a lot easier, because we're no different than anybody else. Because even at the county level, when there's something like the new hotel over there, you pick and choose and you try to figure out how to do an assessment, and how to determine the original value, but there's been so
complicated.
many different things used, and it'd be nice to have, this is it. This is how we're gonna look at this and how we're gonna structure it.
Maybe
But
we
again-
can share that with New York State and they can figure their process out.
But we will, that's something going forward. And like I said, I believe I'll have an application for this development. I think I'll have it within a month, but I just had them look over our application to make sure we aren't missing nothing. It's stated in there that we get a fee. We've never,
Yeah,
we haven't
well,
always gotten it, but it's
Yeah.
there. But I think the assessment's a big thing, because especially for hotels, for rental property and that, it's all over the board how these things are figured out.
it's
And
definitely
it may not be
jurisdiction
with you
specific.
guys, it has to
It's,
be, and
yeah.
it has been in here. There is no rhyme or reason sometimes to why numbers are put on stuff.
Yeah, so definitely developing a uniform practice of the agency is something that we're happy to help with and recommend doing to determine for pilot purposes what the starting assessment will be for the calculations, and then moving towards a model formula, I think is also a good idea going forward, which we have experience with. So we're happy to consult on that and assess. And as Mr. Nisbet mentioned, every jurisdiction is a little bit different in the way that they assess. So there's definitely local considerations to take into effect. So it'll be good to put it to a whole board discussion in the future.
If we do an assessment, do we then recommend that to the town, city?
We don't
No,
really
you
have
can't
to-
take away no, so this is solely for purposes of determining the pilot
The pilot
payments, the
payments.
formula. The assessor has the ultimate jurisdiction to assess the property, but when it's removed off the rolls, I think the issue is that when you remove a property from taxable to the exempt side of the rolls, the assessment's usually not updated, and if it is, it's not truly reflective of what's going on there. Assessments have, like I said, their own unique characteristics, so every municipality has an assessor that is legally entitled to and responsible for assessing the properties in the jurisdiction. This would be just for internal use of the IDA instead of relying on the number that's provided by the local assessor. The IDA would have a way to arrive at a similar figure that they feel is more representative of the project and the property for pilot purposes only.
And then once the pilot's gone,
It goes-
whatever the assessment is, it goes on the rolls based on that assessment.
Yeah,
But I think if we have a fair assessment, and there's nothing that says we can't discuss this with the assessor, because frankly, they've asked me on a few, what do you think of this or that? But they set the assessment. The assessment doesn't necessarily agree with it doesn't agree with all the time with the pilot,
No.
but if you have a fair number, I think we can agree with the initial assessment. As soon as this thing goes up, it should be worth this. And then that gives us a baseline what we start to pilot at,
yeah.
I think.
Yes, this would be for internal purposes. And what Mr. Nisbet's hinting at is that it would be good to talk with the assessor on this, because there's generally a lag in assessments across. That's not unique to here. And once a project's built, obviously that's going to bring up the assessment, and it might not necessarily happen until it's put back onto the taxable side of the roll. So instead of using the assessment, that might be like $50,000 for a vacant plot of land that's then improved to a true fair market value of maybe 500,000. And let's say the assessment's 80% of that, that might not necessarily be reflected immediately in the tax rolls.
We've had trouble with that in the past, so it'd be good to get something uniform that we can understand.
But, we're not the only ones, but I think a couple of ours it's just hard to tie it to any.
You think it's good to have a standard procedure, and that's what we would recommend to be in accordance with us. You want to have something that you are referring to for every single project. It's not just this project's this way. Like, you need to have a uniform procedure to determine your pilot first off, and then base a uniform procedure to determine how the pilot is first calculated and then how the numbers going into it are then again calculated. Reference to local tax rates is usually incorporated in equalization rates, but the assessment can be arrived at differently.
In other words, don't make it up on the fly.
That's.
Yes, exactly. And don't be arbitrary is the key word there.
But it is difficult, like,
Yeah,
because
it's hard.
it's other IDAs, it's the same thing. It's, well, should we determine the value of, say, a hotel by what each room pay? Or should we determine it by what it costs to build a hotel?
Yeah.
It's just, and it's never uniform. I think we ought to get to a point where we agree on the value of this and on what our internal assessment is of this based on set policies. Not,
Yeah, and like a
"Oh, for
measurable
this one we'll do
value.
this, and for this one, and then you'll get, to me, then you get no argument from it. We do the same way every time. So don't think we're playing favorites or because we don't.
Mhm.
But I think if you have a uniform policy, how you set these, you won't have that issue.
I think you certainly should have a uniform one too, legally speaking. So we could definitely talk about that going forward. Thank you for bringing that up.
Should have that a long time ago.
No, you're right. Next thing I have on mine is that Railhead, we signed letters of intent for Railhead for Chad Gillio and Mike Bradley. There was issues their bank had that really had nothing to do with us. We're part of it. And Lizzie, I'm gonna let you do it.
Yeah.
But real quick, their bank financing has really zero to do with us, other than technically the way that the bank
Yeah.
is stated. And the bank must, part of the bank financing must be contingent on them, us leasing
It
the
is,
other property.
it is.
So you can go.
So
from there.
as the board is previously aware, the board had approved an assignment of the lease and pilot, which is to 30 Park Drive, a building that the IDA is in fee title to. The letter of intent was executed with Giglio Bradley LLC back in December due to some financing backgrounds with the bank. I spoke with the purchaser's attorney and the bank attorney yesterday. There is a need to do just a mandatory motion of the board to make it a little bit broader that the letter of intent sticks, but the assignment is to Giglio Bradley or an entity to be formed on their behalf. So from my understanding, and I don't want to get into too much publicly about the business underworkings, but there's a different entity that's been identified that's going to be the actual occupant and operator. So it would be likely that when we do assign the project documents eventually to that, it would be to that entity. And that would avoid the need for us to then do assignment to Giglio Bradley and then another assignment or sublease approval from Giglio Bradley to the operating entity. So all we're asking for, or proposing today, is the board to approve a mandatory vote that the Railhead project documents located at 30 Park Drive can be assigned to Giglio Bradley LLC or an entity to be formed on their behalf, and then ratify the letter of intent. So that's the narrative. If anyone,
I think, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
We had the letter.
I got one question. So they're not going to,
Just said that
trying
wrong.
to, take this and then release it or?
no, that's why that's why
They're
we're
gonna be
doing
the,
this,
I think
because
we all
we need
agreed
to-
that they're gonna be the
They
operator.
are, and this entity, that's why it's formed on their behalf. So it's
Just
gonna be a
an
related
LLC,
entity. It's just another entity for financing purposes. It's gonna be the ultimate operator, and the agreements with the IDA actually prohibit any subleases absent approval by the IDA board. Amending the resolution as it is now avoids the then need, so the documents are going to be assigned directly to the company that's going to own and operate the business out of there, instead of assigning to a landlord company and then having to approve of a separate sublease to the owner and operator. So this is avoiding an additional layer of sublease for complexity purposes and to kind of streamline the financing. But yes, that has to be a related entity of the company that already signed the letter of intent. It's not just going to be anyone. The provisions that require IDA boards approval for any sublease still apply.
And you guys do the documents. for that,
100%,
too.
yes.
Okay, for us to let them take over.
Yep, so there hasn't been like any assignment documents executed yet. We're still very preliminary here. That'll happen once the financing is secured fully, and once they go to close on the actual sale, they'll be executed contemporaneously, and they'll be in the same form as the standard documents would be, just with some obvious modifications just to the entities.
Do we
So,
know where things stand with the property, the transfer,
I don't want
They
to,
thought
Closing date, or
they
we
would
close?
close, they thought they would close in March, but they didn't realize,
Told me.
I'm sure. And it really has nothing to do with us. It's the.
I think in
bank
executive
regs.
session, we could talk further, but I don't want to talk too much about the sensitive details of the company. So if we want to go into executive session at a later point in this meeting or right now and then come back out for the vote, I'm happy to do that, but I can explain
We
to
can
you
do that. I have.
board, I just don't want to, we would have to vote on it in public session, so we could do that now and we could discuss, or we can go into executive now and then vote when we get out. It's up to the board.
Go into executive
Okay.
session and vote.
motion by John?
Second.
We're now in executive session. regular session.
The only thing we have to talk about is the assumption.
Yes.
So I'll make a motion to amend the approval and ratify the letter of intent for the property where the current railhead is, as discussed previously.
Second. Comments, questions, concerns? If not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. The old
I have
business,
nothing.
any new business?
Motion to adjourn?
Second the motion.
Favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Adjourn.
Don't go anywhere just yet. IDC's up next. Maybe should be pretty quick, just some governance stuff.
Do that, Dave.
No one run away.
I'll call the meeting to order for Cornell Industrial Development Corporation. The time is 9:32. Could please have the secretary's report, John?
I'll accept the motion for the secretary's report. It's in your packet.
Make the motion?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Comments? Aye, carried. Treasurer's report, Ed?
February's financials are in your packet. I'll take a motion.
Make the motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Committee reports, audit committee, John?
Nothing to report.
Okay, personnel committee, Ed?
Nothing to report.
Governance, Rick?
Do you want to report that now or wait for the executive director as far as the policy?
We could do it right now.
Yeah,
It's
go.
pretty much meshes into the same thing, so. Thank you. As you guys know, last week and immediately prior to this meeting, the governance committee of the Hornell IDC met to go over policies and annual reviews and procedures, took a close look at some policies, just recommend some revisions with the consultation of council, voted to approve the policies as so amended for adoption by the board. I'm going to run through them quickly. They're in this packet that we have right here. The first one they're going to see is a procurement policy. It looks a bit different than the Industrial Development Agency's policy. As a local development corporation, the IDC is subject to differing standards. So this it's more reflective of the legal requirements of the IDC and increases flexibility. With regards to procurement, the code of ethics, which is very similar to the IDA one, if not almost exactly the same, given the same governing requirements. It's the next policy here. This is unchanged from the IDA one that we went over earlier and the one that we discussed at governance last week. The real property acquisition policy is a new policy being adopted by the IDC just to comply with legal requirements, similar to the IDA's, but just a little bit, again, shorter because differing legal requirements as a non-for-profit corporation. The FOIL public access to records policy legally required to have under the public officers law, similar to the IDA policy, similar to standard policies, set forth the conditions under which the agency will disclose records when so requested. Next, we have the record retention disposition policy, again, adopted to comply with state legal requirements, namely under the executive law. Similar to the standards imposed on the IDA, the IDC is also subject to the same schedule of retention. And then next, again, we just have the investment and deposit policy and the property disposition guidelines. These are unchanged year to year. Again, as public authorities, you are required as a board to review and readopt them annually. So are there any questions on any of the policies for the IDC that we have as so presented and recommended? All right. Well, that'll turn over to the board for a final vote to approve these policies of the IDC.
If I could have a motion to accept the policies.
I'll make a motion.
Second. Any comments? If not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Great, thank you very much. Next up, we're going to just get into approval of the Paris reports. So again, similar to the IDA, the IDC also submits a Paris report in the same fashion. Staff, namely Erin, worked very closely with Julie Marshall on our team in preparing that report. I believe it was circulated for your review. If there are no comments, questions, concerns of that, I will turn it over to the board to approve of the Paris report.
If I could have a motion to,
I'll make a motion.
Second.
any questions, comments, concerns? If not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Great, and then last but not least, the appointments that you had for the IDA, they will be exactly similar. We're suggesting for the IDC. Same appointment sheet, if you still have it in front of you with the big draft numbers, committees, all that stuff. Any questions there? All right, I'll turn it back to the board for a vote to approve appointments for the 2026 year.
If I could have a motion to accept the appointments, Rick?
So moved.
Second by Ed. Any comments? Questions, concerns? If not, everyone in favor say aye.
Aye.
Carried.
All right.
Resolutions, old business, new business.
No, I will just say you guys do have a packet in front of you with annual compliance forms for your approved, for both the IDA and the IDC. If you can just complete those at your leisure and please return them to staff or I, that would be greatly appreciated. Otherwise, I don't have anything else to discuss. Does anyone else have any matters to discuss?
We need to find out, we were talking about IDC, revenue generating, how do we generate revenue?
Yeah, we're gonna talk about that. Yeah, that's part of the reason why we amended some of these policies in the way that we did, but we definitely will talk further about that as we get past annual meetings and into the next month.
Okay.
Yep.
No further business, or do you have a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion.
Ed, second by John. In favor?
Aye.
We're now adjourned.